Begins quite strangely here in UBC. In our chapel, the benediction does not mark the end of every morning worship service. There are always some announcements that keep us on our toes for a few moments. Sometimes it is only when either the screen goes off or when a notable few in the congregation get up from their chairs that we know that the chapel service is over. What follows this strange moment is very interesting. Some of the people crowd up around the worship leader or leaders right here in front and congratulate and thank them on their effort in either preaching or singing or leading the service. What is even more interesting is to note and observe that on most occasions it is people from the close inner circle of the leaders who come up and thank them. It is either people from the same class, or people from the same hostel, or people from the same region. In a phrase, it's simply homogeneity personified. We all know the story from Luke 17, 11 to 19 from our Sunday school days. 10 lepers were cleansed, one came back praising God and thanked Jesus. This one person, as Luke suggests, is a Samaritan. Luke is the only synoptist to have preserved this material. Luke, as we all know, was a Gentile, a physician, a loyal friend of Paul, a great scholar, a master of the Greek language, and a historian, and above all, a great storyteller. Luke's expertise, therefore, compels us to have a deeper look at this story. Every UTCian's go-to book for a sermon, sometimes even before the Bible, is the Word Biblical Commentary. Critiquing the form of this passage, the WBC suggests or struggles to decide what kind of story this really is. Even though at the outset this may look like a healing story, it may not be the case. A strange thing, it would seem. Scholars even suggest that Luke may have added a lot to the story, given that this may or may not have been a historical event. This is arrived at primarily because Luke already has a healing of the leper story mentioned in chapter 5. Let us therefore look at this passage simply as a Lucan story. The nature of exclusions was awful in the first century CE Palestine as is in contemporary times. The Jews and Samaritans at the time of Jesus already had a long-standing conflict. Jews had no dealings with the Samaritans, and yet in this group of 10 lepers, a common sickness had broken down every barrier, racial, religious, and regional, and brought them together as one community. There are three observations on the lifestyle of the leper community that prevailed at this time. First, the 10 lepers, as we saw in the video, stood at a distance from Jesus and his disciples to be in adherence to the commandment recorded in Leviticus 13:46, the one with leprosy must live alone and shall live outside the camp. Second, they formed their own colonies, as we see in 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 3. And third, they positioned themselves near traffic ways in order to make appeals for charity. This story is almost similar to the one in chapter 5, except for some very strange aspects. One of them being Jesus, unlike the story in chapter 5 and other healing narratives in Luke, doesn't go and touch the lepers to heal them. He keeps his distance instead and tells them to go and show themselves to the priest. Yet another strange thing indeed. Showing themselves to the priest was a mandatory thing, according to the law in Leviticus 14, 1 to 32. One long chapter which has in its verses an 8-day ritual for the leper. In this story, however, healing takes place almost very instantly, just as they were walking towards the priest. Let us now consider two sets of word plays in this passage. Luke says in verse 14b, and as they went, they were made clean. In Greek, katharizo. The one leper who was supposedly cleansed, according to Luke, realizes that he was not only clean, but he was healed. in verse 15, in Greek, Eiomai, and returns praising God. Finally, in verse 19, Jesus, on looking at this grateful actions of this leper, says, "Your faith has saved you." So in Greek. I believe the storyteller Luke has intentionally made the shift from clean to heal and then to save. A smooth transition, it may seem, from sickness to wholeness. One can infer that Luke is definitely focusing on this leper, whom he addresses twice in this pericope, in yet another profound wordplay. Luke says in verse 16, "And he was a Samaritan." But then in verse 18, from the mouth of Jesus, we hear the following: "Was none of them found to return and give glory to God except this foreigner?" The Greek word used here, and now we finally arrive at that word which is lying up there on the screen, Allogenes, a word appearing only once in the entire New Testament. The word allos means another, and gene means family, race, nation, tribe, or people, which when put together suggests the phrase "of another tribe," of another people. This has been translated into English either as stranger or foreigner. When all this while we've been content to dwell in this Jewish Samaritan dwell in this story, Jesus, by saying Allogenes, intentionally disturbs us. It seems like Jesus wants to tell us that it is not merely the tensions between two particular communities, but the reality of one's hatred to anyone who is not of one's own community or one's own kind. Allogenes, in fact, was even the term used in the temple, inscribed over there, that forbade the entry of strangers or foreigners into the Jerusalem temple. We must understand that Jews and Samaritans, even amidst their conflicts, still lived alongside each other. Much so because this very incident takes place between the region of Jerusalem and Samaria, and not in either of these places. In a strict sense, the Samaritans were viewed only as half foreign and not entirely foreign. The point over here, therefore, is neither pro-Samaritan nor anti-Jewish, but pro-Allogenes, pro-stranger, pro-foreigner, pro-people not from my community. In this passage, Luke did a strange thing by limiting his understanding of the event to a process of cleansing. And the 9 lepers supposedly did a strange thing by not returning and thanking Jesus. While, if you actually look at it, they indeed did nothing wrong. They actually only obeyed Jesus and went to the priests. The leper who actually did return did a beautifully strange thing by moving out of his comfort zone and doing something really unique, breaking all barriers, even the distance a leper had to keep, and prostrated at the feet of Jesus and glorified God. Jesus, the very personification of strangeness, who cleansed, healed, and finally saved this person just through a conversation, and above all, called him Allogenes, a word which has infested us today. Finally, wisdom can come from anywhere. Allogenes, the stranger, is a genre of mystical Gnostic texts dating from the first half of the 3rd century CE, which was discovered in the recent past and is placed as the 3rd item in Codex 11 of the Nag Hammadi library, those of you who are interested for the thesis topic. Studies say that this text seems to portray Jesus as the stranger during his lifetime before his passion and crucifixion. No wonder then that this term has found its way into the New Testament. So what are we getting at today? We all do strange things in life. Nonetheless, the strangest thing we can do is building relationships with strangers, persons from another community, by breaking down the walls of separation and the comforts of homogeneity. And what better place than UTC to dare to do this? Often in our minds, we limit ourselves and feel content thereof by categorizing only women or Dalits or the LGBT and other queer communities as strange. Yet, we do not realize the extent to which we ostracize the Allogenes in our very midst. Today we have heard something strange, and may we be disturbed to respond to this strangeness. May God be with us all. Amen.